is August 1st, Tuesday, and the Education Committee will now come to order. I detect a quorum. We have Suara, Cash, Hauser, Porterfield, and Sepulveda. Thank you. Do we have anyone for public comment? All right, seeing none, we'll move to our agenda item. The first thing on the agenda is Resolution IRS 2023-2343 by Roten, Syracuse, and Hancock approves an application for the statewide School Resource Officer Program grant from the Tennessee Department of Safety and Homeland Security for the placement of school resource officers in schools for the continued efforts to establish and maintain safe and secure learning environments. Do I have a motion?
So moved.
Second? All right, moved and seconded. Any discussion? All right.
There's been discussion in the media lately about school resource officers in elementary schools. Mm-hmm. What is the scope of this? Is it K through 12 or what?
So from my understanding, again, this is the police departments. This is a police department. From my understanding, it's those school resource officers. This grant applies to the ones in the high school and the middle schools that are already existing. So we're trying to get the $75,000 grant for them. The elementary schools, from what I understand, again, just having talked with folks, they are in the process of putting in that kind of grant application, but you have to marry up, from my understanding, the officer and the school together to do that. So that's where they are. At that point, my understanding is, again, this is just, again, not the schools per se. My understanding is that once that happens, then it would come through, and that grant application would come through y'all.
Separate.
Yes, I'm sorry, that's a long way of saying it would
So
be
there's
separate.
just the application, it's not
yesterday.
approval.
I could address that.
This is the application for those middle school and high school SROs that we're putting in for the $75,000 grant for those positions, and they already are in existence. So we have those are the SROs that we've had since the program's been in place. The elementary school, when that happens, will be an extension. But that
It would have to come back to us.
Yes, exactly.
And I just wanted to say that this was taken up in budget yesterday, and we have a representative from MMPD that attended, and he did say that, it did not say it was for the ones already in existence, but it did say that it was for middle and high school, not elementary school.
So do we think this is something we do every year?
Councilmember Porterfield.
Can we get MMPD in here though? Because I have questions for MMPD. So I appreciate that they were in budget, but they should also be in here.
I'll see if I can get someone.
Thank you, I appreciate
you.
There
it.
should be enough
So the grants that we're talking about that are these state grants haven't been in place before when we've had the SRO program. So our SRO program, I think we've been funding as the city, right? Metro's been doing it, right?
Okay.
So this
That
is
makes
an
sense.
opportunity to at least kind of get that $75,000 per SRO that the state's offering up through the legislation that passed. So what we have now, that's sort of what the SRO program is right now. From my understanding, this is through the police, so
Yeah.
I'm sort of secondhand about this.
So is this 175,000 or 75,000?
75 per SRO. So
And do we know how many that are?
I believe I counted up, and I think it's like 46 if I've done my math
46?
right.
Right, and I'm going to ask an ignorance question here.
Do you want to wait for somebody from MMPD because it's their application? And let me also add that based on what MMPD said yesterday, they really don't need council approval for the application. They're going to apply
more of a
anyway.
head-ups?
Yes, but when they get the money, that's when they have to have our approval. But I think it would be good for MMPD to be here. One of the questions that I asked them yesterday was that Chief Drake said he wasn't going to go for the grants. That will change. And the officer said that, there we go. Hello.
Also, I don't think I've sunk the boat yet, so
Can you finish your statement? Can you finish your statement?
Yes, so I think, were you the one in budget yesterday?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, good. I was saying that I asked a question about Chief Drake, or something in the news about the police department was not going to apply for this grant. And so what changed? Why are we going after it?
So the plan all along was to apply for the grant. So the grant rules are that in order to be eligible for the money, you have to have a full-time SRO assigned to that school. And they literally have a list of schools, and you say, yep, I'm going to put one here, 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 and then they will assign funding based on those number of schools. We currently, because of staffing, only have the capacity to staff SROs at high schools and middle schools. Chief Drake's been very clear that his ultimate goal would be to put an SRO in each of the elementary schools. There are 70, but we don't currently have the staff to do that. Since we don't have the staff to do that, under the grant rules right now, we couldn't apply for those 70 schools. So we were applying for I believe it's 3.45 million. Those are the schools that we absolutely say, yep, we have an SRO, and we're going to put them in those schools. The remaining money was available, but we can't pull at this time because, like I said, we don't have the staffing. We're working towards that, and my understanding is the conversations we've had with the state is that if we do get our staffing up and we're able to place someone in those schools, at that time we can request that money, at which time we would have to come back before council to request the additional funding to be pulled down. I will say, and I'm sorry, I'll get you, but real quick, I do want to put this out there. We're not leaving elementary schools uncovered. We would be using the model that we used at the end of last year, which is using, unfortunately, our money, our overtime funding to have officers patrol those elementary schools. It's just not having a full-time officer in the school, and because of the rules with the state grant, we weren't able to use that money for that purpose. So, I'm sorry.
Ms. Bowser?
Yeah, the question that I have, and I apologize my ignorance here, but are officers hired to be SROs, or are they already a police officer and they get special training to become an SRO?
It's the latter. So you are hired as an officer. That process, that's one of the things that we pointed out was, look, even if I wanted to put 70 officers in these schools, it takes a year to train. So 6 months in an academy, roughly, and 6 months with a field training officer. So we would have to be reassigning officers that already exist into the SRO role. They do have additional training for that, but of course that creates a vacancy in the field or in the detective bureau. So,
Thank you.
Any other comments? Councilmember Porterfield?
Thank you. Thank you for joining us. I had a couple of questions here. So currently, do all of the middle schools and high schools have an SRO officer?
they will as of the start of school.
Okay. But last school year, we did.
Last school year, I think there was some gaps in the middle school coverage. All the high schools were covered, but not all the middle schools.
Okay.
And we've since filled those gaps.
Okay, thank you. How do you all prioritize, like, which schools will get SRO officers when you don't have enough officers, and then going into adding them into the elementary schools, assuming you don't get 70 people at one time, if you get 10 people, how do you prioritize which schools then get the officers?
Yeah, I think that's a discussion we still have to have. I haven't spoken with Chief Drake specifically about how we prioritize that. I imagine it would involve a discussion with MNPS as well, but that still remains to be decided.
Okay, I want to raise that concern because just kind of coming off of the LPR conversation with like equitable distribution, and I think what is looked at as equitable distribution doesn't always feel like equitable distribution to the community. So I just want to make sure that that's lifted up and that's a part of the conversation.
Sure.
The grant that you all are applying for, it's 3.45 or 3.46 million. Does this then reduce the police budget by that amount, since we will now be, going into next year's budget? Would there be a recommendation to reduce the budget because now the money that police was allocating for SRO officers will now be covered by the state? So does that mean MNPD will then look at reducing their budget by that amount?
Unfortunately, the amount that the state is paying doesn't even cover the cost of the officer. So it's a $75,000 per SRO. This current fiscal year, fringe and salary is for a PO2, average PO2, which is your solo officer, is about $103,000, and that's not including equipment and training and other things. So it's not going to displace or offset the total cost. And I don't know My understanding is the state wants to do it again in the future, but I don't know that this is a recurring funding source.
I think from the passage, I think it is, but
Okay.
again, that's always going to be subject to every budget year, right? I mean,
Right. Yeah.
that is, so it's something that's going to have to be tended to at the state level every year.
All right, thank you. Any other question, comments?
Yeah, still got a couple more, sorry. I'll make it quick, Chair, thank you.
No
I will reserve the rest of these, because the rest of these are budget questions, so I'll reserve them for Budget Committee moving forward. So to be clear, this is not expanding the program, this is just reimbursing MMPD for a portion of the expenses.
That's correct.
Okay. Is there room, or where's room in the conversation for, I've heard from people that have concerns about SRO officers being in schools. So I've heard from educators, I've heard from parents, I've heard from students that have very valid concerns about SRO officers being in the school. Where is the appropriate place for us to have that conversation? Like, is that a, town hall between MMPD and MMPS and the council and the parents? Like, how do we kick off that conversation? And I understand that school safety is a priority for all of us. I'm a MMPS parent. I want my kid to be safe every day at schools. Not all parents believe that an armed officer in schools is what keeps our kids safe. So where do we have that conversation?
I think that's, like you mentioned, town halls are a good idea and have occurred in the past. I know we have a school safety division. Captain Bowers, who some of y'all may have met, heads that up. And I know he and his staff have attended several town halls, particularly since the Covenant incident. And I'm sure they'd be happy to attend any that any council member or anybody else wants to host and would like them to attend. I'm happy to help arrange that too.
Okay, thank you.
All right, before I take the vote, I do want to, okay.
You go, if you were going to say
I
something.
have something to say, but I was waiting for everybody, but it's okay.
I was
You
just
go
going to
on.
follow up on what she said and say to schools that, if you could look into how you all get feedback on, how the program is working and that there's consensus in the school or schools.
We're very mindful of that point,
Yeah.
and we work very closely with the police department on this, and they understand sometimes our concern, particularly in the past, the elementary level. But yeah, it's always the conversation that we're in, and we're always seeking feedback at every level, really, parents, teachers, and it's a critical part of the conversation. And we have great partners in the police department about this, so.
Yeah, I'm so sorry. 5 seconds, so sorry.
It's all right.
Just the feedback and the concern is when SRO officers are being used for behavioral issues and not being used for crime. So that should not happen. Under no circumstance should an SRO officer be used to address a child's behavior in the classroom. And we know that data supports that Black and brown children are disproportionately impacted with there's some disproportionality when we're looking at behavior implementation with Black and brown students in our school system, and SRO officers should not be used to address behavior. If there's a behavior concern, there is a route that teachers should go through the school, whether that's through the counselor or the behavior intervention plan or a functional behavior assessment, but at no time should an SRO officer be used for behavior. So I just want to make sure that that's being a part of the conversation.
We concur, and in our relationship with the police department, we've avoided that, and I think we're copacetic on that point as well. But it's always good, obviously, to be mindful of it and continue to talk about it and be aware of it. And I think we all are, we share that point.
Thank you.
Thank you. It's a good conversation. I'm glad that we had it. When we had the special session that Councilmember Syracuse and I led, that was part of the conversation that we talk about, and talking about how the disproportionality of arrest of Black and brown people comes into this, and how that conversation continues. And I was going to share also what Councilmember Porterfield was saying, is that there was a research shared by the National Education Association that actually says that when you have SROs in school, does not necessarily make it safe. as a matter of fact, that children of color feels like they're not safe in school when they see armed officers in schools. And so that conversation is still there. That was the reason why I was a no yesterday. And for me, I will still be a no today because I still think that until we hash that out, until everybody understands that that is a problem, I think not safety of our children is important. Making sure that we have what we need is important, and we're going to continue that. But as a way to make sure that there is another conversation that we ought to be having, that we're not having enough of, and the impact, negative impact of not having those conversations, I still think we need to be making sure that we're highlighting it. And so for that, I would be a no on the vote because I still think that SROs in school is still detrimental and it's not hashed out completely yet. But I appreciate, thank you, Officer Gilda, for being here and for everybody for a good conversation. So if there's no further comment, we're ready to vote. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Is that 4 or 2? Is that 2? Okay. Against?
Oh.
I'm a no.
Against. I heard a yes. I was like, a yes?
Okay, so you have 2, 4, 3 against. You did not recommend. Any abstention? Well, there's only 5 of us. Well, all right. Thank you very much. We only have one more item before you all leave. It is BL 2023-2108, Justin Roten, Sora, and others, approves the lease between the Metro Nashville Public Schools and Hispanic Family Foundation for the establishment of an EL enrollment site. Do I have a motion?
So moved.
Second? Probably moved and seconded. Any discussion?
Where is the site? Is this at Casa Azafran?
Plaza.
No, it's Hispanic Foundation, Family Foundation.
Foundation, and that's at
Plaza Mariachi.
Plaza, yeah, okay.
We also have one, I think, at Azafran as well.
Yes.
So it's the same model as the one in Azafran.
So this is EL enrollments where people come to enroll for English as a second language. Is it how many languages is covered? Is it just Hispanic or is it all languages?
I'm assuming it's all languages, but I think because those are such cultural points for folks coming in, it's easier for folks to get there.
Would you confirm that
I will
for me and
confirm all
see how many
languages.
languages we have there?
I will.
And since we're talking about languages before we take a vote, we did a budget asking that we have the family connector that speaks the languages of the different communities. How is that progressing? Any update on that?
I'll get one for you.
Could you please do that before the next meeting?
I absolutely will.
I appreciate it. And we can just talk about it at the next meeting. I think that would be fun. All right. Any further discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Any abstention? All right. Vote carries. You recommend approval. Thank you very much. That's the last item on the agenda, and we're now adjourned.
I'll try to get those numbers as quick as I can.
Okay. All right.